You ever wonder why you just click with some people, like instantly, and then completely misread others? Yeah, that's not magic. It's actually your own mental software, your perception, running in the background. So today, we're going to pop the hood on that powerful, kind of invisible engine and really see how it shapes every single one of your interactions.
And that brings us to a huge question, right? Why do we get people wrong so often? And maybe even more important, how can we turn that lens around and see ourselves a little more clearly? Okay, let's dive in.
All right, first up, let's really get into the nuts and bolts. We're going to look at your personal perception engine to see how this whole thing actually works. From the very second you see something to that moment you decide what it all means.
So what is perception, really? At its core, it's just the process of making sense of everything we experience. Think about it. It's how our brain takes all this raw, chaotic data from the world and somehow turns it into a story that we can actually understand.
And this perception engine? Well, it runs on a pretty simple three-step process. First, there's selection. Your brain has to decide what's even worth paying attention to. Next up is organization, where it quickly files that information into different categories. And finally, there's interpretation, where you decide what it means to you. Selection, organization, interpretation. It all happens faster than you can even blink.
Okay, but in a world that's just constantly bombarding us with information, what actually makes it through that mental filter? Well, our brains are basically hardwired to notice three kinds of things. First, anything unusual or totally unexpected. Second, stuff we see over and over and over again. And finally, anything that's just intense, like a blaring alarm or a super bright color. Those are the things that get our attention.
But, just like any piece of software, our perception engine has some, common glitches. These are mental shortcuts that can really lead us down the wrong path. So let's take a look at why the system goes wrong sometimes.
Let's take stereotyping, for example. It's something we can break down into this almost automatic three-part process. Step 1, you identify a group someone belongs to. Step 2, you recall some generalization you've picked up about that group. And Step 3, you apply that generalization to the person standing right in front of you. It's a mental shortcut, sure, but it can be so inaccurate and honestly deeply unfair.
And then you've got this classic battle happening in our minds all the time. The primacy effect versus the recency effect. So the primacy effect says that first impression is everything. It sets the tone for all future interactions. But then, the recency effect argues that no, actually the most recent impression is the one that's way more powerful. So, which one wins out in your life? It's something to think about for sure.
So, whenever you see someone do something, anything, from cutting you off in traffic to giving an amazing presentation, your brain immediately asks, why did they do that? The answer you come up with, that little story you tell yourself to explain their behavior, that's what we call an attribution. But here's the thing. We are not always fair storytellers, not by a long shot. We tend to have what's called a self-serving bias. When we succeed, hey, it's because we're awesome, right? But when we fail, it's because of the situation. But for other people, we often commit the fundamental attribution error. When they fail, we're quick to blame their character, not their circumstances. See the problem? We give ourselves a break that we just don't give to other people.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how we see others, but what happens when we turn that lens around? What happens when we look inward? How do we even begin to see ourselves?
Well, the foundation for all of that is your self-concept. You can think of it as your identity, really. It's that stable set of perceptions you hold about who you are. And it includes everything, your name, your skills, your relationships, even the way you judge yourself.
And this is a really cool tool for understanding all this stuff. It's called the Johari window. It basically breaks down our self-awareness into 4 quadrants. You've got the open area, that's the stuff you and others both know about you. Then there's the blind area. That's what other people see in you that you can't see yourself. Oof. The hidden area is what you know about yourself but you keep secret. And finally, the unknown area is a total mystery to everyone. Real self-awareness comes from trying to shrink that blind spot, usually by getting some honest feedback from people you trust.
And this brings us to a super powerful idea, the self-fulfilling prophecy. Basically, what you predict can become true. When we create an expectation, either about ourselves or someone else, we often start acting in ways that make that prediction happen. A classic example is a teacher who thinks a student is brilliant. They'll probably give that student more attention, more challenging work, and what happens? The student excels. It's wild. Our predictions can literally shape reality.
So we have this internal idea of who we are, but how does that translate to the outside world? Well, that brings us to our final section, managing your public face.
You know, the you that you project out there every single day.
Okay, so in communication studies, your face is just your desired public image. It's how you want people to see you. And face work, that's all the stuff you do, the way you talk, the way you dress, how you act, to project and maintain that image.
And through all this face work, we're all the time, trying to satisfy three basic needs. First is fellowship face. That's our need to be liked and accepted. Then you have autonomy face, our need to feel independent, to not be imposed on. And finally, competence face, our need to be seen as capable and respected. Honestly, every single interaction we have is kind of a delicate dance to try and meet these needs.
So I guess the big takeaway here is that managing your image, it's not a solo act. It's not something you do in a vacuum. It's totally collaborative. It's this complex, constant social dance that we are all a part of. So we've seen that perception is not some perfect photograph of reality, right? It's a creative process. It's messy. It's full of glitches and shortcuts and the stories that we tell ourselves. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Knowing all this, knowing that what you see isn't the whole picture, who will you try to see differently tomorrow?